BREWtally Speaking podcast is proudly sponsored by rockabilia.com. For over 30 years, Rockabilia has been the go-to destination for all things band merch. With over 500,000 items in their online store and collaborations with today's hottest bands, you're sure to find something you love. Use our code BREW10 at checkout and take 10% off your total order. So go pick up your favorite new piece of merch now over at rockabilia.com. And now, on to the show.
Say you have to have a lot of passion for what you're doing. This rings true because it's so hard that if you don't, any rational person would give up. It's really hard, and you have to do it over a sustained period of time. So if you don't love it, and if you're not having fun doing it, you're gonna give up.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the BREWtally Speaking podcast. I am your host, John, and this episode's guests are Dave, Scott, and Steven, collectively known as Haste the with some other guys. I guess I shouldn't have changed the rest of the members of the band. Anyway, their latest single, Burn, is out now. They recently re-signed to Solid State Records. Also just dropped a remaster version of Coward for the 10th anniversary edition of that. Lots going on in the Haste Today world. I know they are writing and I believe probably at this point demoing or pre-pro for whatever the next album or EP or whatever will be. But this felt like a long time coming. Full transparency, man. I have tried recording this intro. I think this is probably like the 8th or 9th one because I like to try to do it as most of a one shot as possible. And there's so many things about this band for me that I want to hit on and things that I touched on in the actual chat, things I've been thinking about leading up to doing this outro for the episode. I mean, it's kind of hard to encapsulate just a lot of what this band means to me, living here in Michigan, being so close to them in Indianapolis, obviously the ties to the Still Remains camp, with them playing and touring so much. They're just kind of a band that are just so ensconced in a lot of my life, living here in the Midwest from, getting into heavier music in the early 2000s. And I would say back in the days, late 90s, early 2000s, labels were king. I've talked about that where, you almost could just go find a record and be like, oh, it's on Roadrunner, I'm picking it up. Oh, someone so produced this, I'm picking it up. And it's sight unheard. I guess not sight unheard. That would be eyes and listening. So sight unseen or note unheard, or however you want to do one for hearing. But it's a thing where the thing that I've really been latching on to, thinking about doing this intro and outro, is just sort of the divisiveness of this band, almost from the jump. Like, I remember, quote unquote, either the big selling point or the detriment of this band was the vocalist. Everyone was like, I love Zayo, so I really love Jimmy Ryan, and I love what this band's doing. Or it was, I can't fucking stand that vocalist. I hate that band, and I hate Zayo. And it was just so interesting to see how divisive it is. And then, Jimmy leaves, and this new era kind of comes in of Haste the Day, and sort of the expectations, I remember, of a lot of people. Are they going to get someone that sounds like Jimmy? Are they going to get someone, what is it going to sound like? And I think for me, and this is kind of probably a hot take, but I think for me, the thing from note one of listening to Pressure of the Hinges when it came out was, oh, this band's actually able to write better songs now. And I don't want to say it's simply because Jimmy's not in the band and Jimmy couldn't do these things. I think for me, I've always been kind of this weird outlier where it's like, I do love parts in songs. Like, there are certain songs, like a good breakdown riff, whatever, I'll go back to that part. But I think for me, I've always been a bigger fan of songwriting, of just, it's not parts, it's writing better songs. And to me, and again, soon I remember getting Pressure of the Hinges, taking it out of the packaging, throwing it in my Walkman, my CD Walkman, or my Discman, I guess. And it was a thing where you could just tell the band had grown exponentially as songwriters. And I don't want to discredit and just say it's because Steven came in the band and vocally he was able to do a wider array of things than maybe Jimmy was capable of doing at the time. but it was just so obvious from the first notes and everything that it's like, oh, this band, something different is happening in this band. And I think moving forward for me, the songwriting got better and better. But it was interesting because as you know, you lost the fans who were like, Jimmy is Haste Today. So Haste Today's dead to me now that he's not in it. But then we got all the way to Attack of the Wolf King. And I remember like the big divisive thing about that, like the stance everyone was taking on why they weren't into that record or why they weren't going to give it a fair shake was because there was quote unquote no original members. I think Scott literally is the only original member left, but it's a thing where it's like, that was such a weird thing for people to be like, I'm boycotting this album essentially because there's no original members. Meanwhile, it's like, to me, it was some of the best songs the band had ever written. And subsequently, I mean, I can't really speak to the actual touring numbers or anything, but it seemed like, you know, more or less the numbers across the board just weren't great, and the band went on, like, did a farewell show, packed it up and called it a day. And it's funny to see how times and opinions change. And I don't know if it's just because we're not in the collective hive mind anymore of like, you know, the message boards or our friends that we're trying to impress or whatever. But it seems like now, 10 plus years later, that Attack of the Wolf King is finally getting like the just due it always deserved. And people are like, oh man, this is actually a really good record with really great songs. And it's just, I don't know, it's really interesting to kind of see that. But like, as I've been thinking about doing this intro outro and kind of explaining what the band means to me, how, you know, stoked I was to do this chat with the guys, it's just been really interesting to think about how divisive the band has always been to fans or non-fans, I guess. And I honestly can't think of very many other bands that probably went through that almost from the jump. Like, you know, I guess 36 Crazy Fists would sort of be one of the few that I can think of, but it's really only because of the exact same reasons. I hate Brock's voice, or I love Brock's voice. It's one or the other. There's not much middle ground. But it's just a weird thing to think of, especially given the fact of, like I said, the era of if a band's on this label or a producer produce this album, I'm picking it up. Even if I've never listened to it, if I don't know the band at all, I know that the faith, no pun intended, that I have in these labels and these producers, they're not going to steer me wrong. It's just, I don't know. It's just such an interesting time to remember being around and being a music fan and you know, the internet kind of slowly becoming what it became. It's just really interesting. And Haste the Day has kind of been a through line through all of it. All of that said, let's get into my conversation with the guys, and I'll talk to you on the other side of it. There we go. So this might be the most people I've had to do one thing at a time in a very long time. So I will do my best to make sure I ask questions that are broad enough for everybody, but then also try to include everybody as well. I guess let's start with where we're at currently as we sit. You guys are back. There's a new single. You guys are re-signed. Obviously, I know these things, videos don't take as long as they used to, as I've learned in the last few years. It seems like video turnovers are about a week now, but beyond all that, it seems like everything obviously takes a long time and pieces fall into place. So how did we get back to Haste the Day coming back?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, Furnace Fest is 2023 was what pulled us out of retirement. Chad was very persistent and rightfully so. Most of us wanted to. There's one member that didn't want to. And, you know, every time he'd ask and every time he'd send a new offer or whatever, it was like, I don't know, maybe, probably not though. And then finally it just we all started talking and like, we really want to do this. Like, this is an opportunity. Furnace Fest is like iconic. It would be super fun to get back and try and do it again. And, we really weren't planning on going that much further, like maybe booking like a few other shows after Furnace Fest, but that was pretty much it. And then once we got together for that show and finally did it, we realized like, this is so much fun and this means so much to us. We've been out of it for a long time, but like, it just kind of became evident how important this part of our lives is to us and how good it is for all of us, I think, individually. And so then we just, of course, started talking about new music pretty much right. I think I remember talking about new music like after the night we played Furnace Fest in 2023. Like we stayed up pretty late just like talking about what it could look like. And yeah, we worked pretty hard on Burn and another song. And then just Scotty's been working hard writing a bunch of bangers. And we've been putting it together for an album. And it's been fun.
I always feel like in this day and age, it's really hard to keep a secret because especially in this industry, like you got to get a producer, you got to get photographers, you got to get, more people involved in the process. How hard was it to keep, everything beyond Furnace Fest kind of under lock?
Like not telling anybody about it?
And not having it leak, more importantly.
I don't know. I think it was kind of easy. I mean, we weren't super tight-lipped about anything. Like we talked about it talked about doing new music on a podcast like a long time. Like when was that? Like earlier this year, like March or something. But we weren't like making a big deal about it really until we actually had something to release. I think it's just that, the algorithm hides things that Scotty's been posting about, like, just like he'll write a riff or something and post it. And, the algorithm wants to hide our stuff.
Yeah. I think it's a lot less about being tight-lipped about it and more that we don't have really the biggest like following. So nobody was really paying attention. So we were just doing our thing. Like I said, Scotty was posting riffs all the time. So it definitely wasn't like a secret that we were working on new stuff. And even this year we were playing that new song at most of the shows that we've played. So there was like clips of it floating around online from like videos from people at shows.
But when Solid State makes a release, they have such a great following.
Yeah.
That it then goes to everything. And, they're admired by the algorithm. So,
So I have kind of an interesting question for all of you. This show isn't necessarily, I don't like to keep it kind of rooted in talking about an album or whatever, because I feel like that very much dates when it's done. And I like to just kind of have conversations with people sort of about more of like the human process of like going through life. So I think something when I think about you guys collectively that I would want to know is obviously, there was different eras of the band. Everyone kind of came in at different points, had different tenures and so forth. But obviously the end came for all of you, like you guys decided to call it a day. I remember, quick funny side tangent. You guys were, I think, the second song into that set at Indy, and I sprained my ankle, bumped into my wife. She thought I was a random like crowd surfing whatever, and then dumped her beer on me. So for the rest of your set, I was so bummed that I had just rolled my ankle really badly. And then I had like shitty, sticky beer stuck to me. And I was like, now I'm just like sitting through the rest of your set like this, like, just like, oh. So funny story.
That's how you met your wife?
No, that's not how I met my wife. I had already been dating her at that point for a couple of years, but I had won some money at a casino and One of the things I spent the money on was her, myself, and a friend went to go see you guys do your last show in Indy with the Stilly Dudes. But that was, I think, one of the first times since the Atreyu It Dies Today tour you had done that I had seen since then when you guys played the Orbit Room RIP. But it's just a thing to me when I think about that, because it was such kind of a very grandiose way to close out the set. Dave, I remember you kind of, I think, being on People or a piece of plyboard or something, playing like the end of the set. So it was like a really good send-off, essentially. And to me, it kind of harkens to the end of an era for something, an end of a part of your life or whatever. And I know that there's probably reconciliation that goes through that of like, well, now who am I? Now what do I want to do now that I'm not this to so many people? But I'm almost more interested in what does it look like when you come back and then come back again? Because I feel like as we're talking about an algorithm and how it takes time to get things back on track, I feel like it's got to do the same for your personal life, kind of going through this start-stopping thing of like, we're back. No, we're not. No, we're back again. So how is that process? How was it for all of you individually and then I guess collectively?
Yeah, anyone want to take that?
Well, yeah, I mean, all of us had different experiences with it individually. Like I didn't want us to break up when we decided to stop touring. But at the same time, I recognized that it was like needed to happen, like it was, people were moving on to different phases of life. Families were getting started, and, being on the road full time for X amount of years is, not the easiest thing to do for any sort of like feeling like you have stability. So there was definitely like a collective sense of like, hey, we got to stop this kind of lifestyle. Like, I think, life is moving on, and we all kind of want to do other things and have kind of a more like stable like foundation to live. But yeah, all of us dealt with it in different ways. The identity thing that you mentioned was huge, I think, for all of us. I think earlier this year we were on Steven's podcast, like the whole band was, and we were talking about all dealing with it in different ways and processing it in different ways. But then like regarding starting again, that was also, it felt like a very collective decision where all of us had kind of like walked these meandering paths in different ways. And I think the time allowed everyone to heal in a way that it felt fresh again, and didn't need to be like the foundation for our identity, like individually, but it can still and will always be a meaningful part of who we are and how we express ourselves. So that's kind of like my perspective on, stopping and starting. The end of the era thing was big. And I think that was one of the reasons we didn't want to do Furnace Fest, or at least, one of the guys that Steven referenced didn't want to do it, is he felt like the way that we ended Haste the Day was like so perfect and like so epic that he didn't want to, tarnish the legacy of all of that. And I think a lot of the discussions we had was, yes, that is true. And also the legacy really is like community and, being a part of something that's a lot bigger than ourselves, and thinking about how much of an opportunity it is and how special it is to still be able to be a part of that community, and like reconnecting with fans and reconnecting with each other. Like, we very quickly realized that it is a very special thing. It doesn't have to be a start-stop situation. It can just be kind of a fluid thing where you don't have to put like boundaries around it or whatever. So the whole process, I think, was really cool, and probably had to happen the way that it did in order for us to come back and have this different perspective.
Yeah. Scotty, you have something?
Yeah. I mean, it's such a, like, we've all talked about this so much because it's a huge topic. Like, when we broke up in 2011, I know for me, like, I was the youngest guy and I was the newest member. I was like 22 years old. To like join Haste stay and like live the dream. Like I didn't want it to. So when we broke up, that was a period of like identity crisis. Um, I'm grateful for it. I found a whole other career path and met my wife. I think going through that was like pretty turbulent and confusing and hard. Then doing Coward was kind of this connecting back to it, writing new music, playing those shows, and that was pretty healing. Then we stopped again, and then during that period, from Coward till now, um, yeah, again a lot of searching, like who are we outside of this band, which is a wild transition. You know, you go from playing on stage, people who know your music and want to see and money to see your music, to just being a normal person with a normal job, uh, and what you're good at outside of playing guitar. Um, when you started talking to me about getting back together and doing Furnace, at that point, almost like, man, I have developed my identity outside of the band so much that I'm hesitant to open it up. It's emotional, it brings back like all the meaning that the band meant through my life. But I'm so glad that we did it. Furnace Fest was incredible last year. And I really genuinely like the community and passion we've always felt in this band. It wasn't just nostalgic, like nostalgic, but also like no, I felt so much more of a whole person, like both in. So I was like, man, I'm so happy to bring this part of my life into my life and make new music, make it new and fresh, and not just like make it in the past. But it's been amazing. It's been so like it feels new at the same time, and yeah, stoked. I'm grateful to be doing it now.
I think a thing that was kind of interesting in thinking about the band, and I don't know if this is everyone's experience. I'll say from your side, from like fans saying this to you or not, but it was interesting because I feel like there's, we live in an era now where like there are plenty of bands that have no original members and are still moving on. Basically, like look at Norma Jean, look at, we can go all the way back to like bands like Foreigner that don't have any original members in it. They're still continuing on. So there has always kind of been sort of the recipe of like how to navigate this in a way that's respectful to the legacy that was before while still kind of creating something moving forward. I would wonder, given the fact that the three of you are now at a point where I don't think Brennan's the only original member that's left now, right?
Mike is original too.
Yeah, Mike's still there. Yep. Okay. So Mike and Brennan are the only ones that are left from the original era of the band. But I was going to say, I remember when Attack of the Wolf came out, and I remember a lot of people, it almost felt like there was a lot of division on that record where it's like the old G fans were like, this ain't even Haste Today anymore. It doesn't sound like Haste Today. It has none of the members, so on and so forth. And I feel like now there's kind of become this revisionist history on that record where I feel like a lot of people now give it the fair shake it should have always gotten. And I feel like people are like, that's probably one of the strongest Haste the Day records in the entire catalog. Have you noticed that as well? Or is there still sort of that, I don't want to say backlash, but just kind of that like, I'm this era or I'm this era, and you have still a division of the fan base?
I think we were all incredibly surprised at how many times people came up to us and told us that was their favorite record. Because, to us, the music industry was starting to tank like right around then. Streaming was becoming a thing. That record sold like a quarter of what Pressure the Hinges sold. And it was, it was very clearly like a decline. So, although that is probably internally, I know it's like our favorite record, probably the people who were on it at least. And I look back at that time and there was something so special about the five of us then and how we wrote music together and how we how we approached everything. There was such a community between us. We would all stay in my house in Indianapolis and stay up till like 3 a.m. working on music, and and it just shows on that record. But we were all very surprised to see that people started kind of giving it a chance, I guess, over the time that we haven't been around. And that made us really happy and really excited about the future. And of course, like everybody has, their favorite records. Like there still are the like old fans who have been around since the beginning, and they might say that When Everything Falls or Burning Bridges are their favorite album. But they're still there at the shows. And same with like Press the Hinges, Dreamer, and like it's like everybody's got their favorite. But it did blow us away how many people told us that Wolf King was their favorite. It was cool.
Maybe this is a weird question, because with how you guys did Coward, which I thought was a really interesting way to appease everybody, literally and figuratively, how was that record? How was it to do that record? Because I feel like it's either the easiest thing because you can kind of all work in different tandems and get stuff done very quickly. But I can also, just understanding the more cooks you add to a kitchen, it gets a little bit harder to like get things done like evenly. So I feel like at times like that would either be a really fun experience, or it probably could have been a very like strenuous one, because I'm working over here, but we got to finish this. And you're kind of looking at like a board to finish the songs. And you're like, I am all over the place to finish this thing because I have to rely on other people now to do their parts and so forth. But I feel like that had to have been an interesting experience as a whole, just for all of you who were fans of the band before you were in it. And then obviously getting to kind of fully encapsulate what the band was as a whole. So how was that process for all of you?
It was equally hard to rewarding. Like I look back and I can think of like so many times where we just had a blast. Like the three of us in the studio, just like hanging out for a few weeks, recording guitars and just like all the creativity that came out of that album, and working with Scotty on a lot of like writing a lot of the songs was incredible. However, it was, just for the reasons you just stated, it was an organizational nightmare to do that record. And also I think there was a lot of like unresolved drama that had not been addressed. And it, of course, kind of came to a head through that experience. And I would say that because of that experience, it like helped us like look at it and see it for face value and address it eventually. I don't think it all got addressed like during that time, but shortly after it did, and definitely has been addressed now as far as I know. But it was an emotional time. I don't know, you guys have anything to add to that?
That's exactly what I was going to say. Go ahead, Scotty. You go first. And also, Scott, can you maybe talk a little bit closer to your microphone, because I think there was just some ambient noise that was like picking up.
Yeah. Is that any better?
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I love that record. I love making it, and that was the first time we made music since Attack of the Wolf King, several years. So in a way, at least for me, because like different than you, Steven, I didn't produce it and I didn't have my hands in all the members. Like, so for me, it was actually just like it is now, as far as like, I'll write a riff or a song, send it to you, you'll write a riff, send it to me. So the three of us together in the studio, and I think our process was kind of very similar to what it is now. So like, as far as I felt, was happy and just like joyful with the then wrote lyrics, collaborated with all the former members, and on the other, personally, I love making a record. Really love those songs still. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I think there's a myth that it was this huge, like, all the members of the day who had been in the band collaborate, which in a way it was, but it was more like the core of the Wolf King line wrote most of those, really all of those songs, and then except was the old lineup. Then Jimmy collaborated with Steven to the lyrics and vocals for a number of the songs, so it was hodgepodge, but I was the core, kind of like different in a way. So anyway,
Is Scott's mic breaking up for anybody else?
Yeah, I just thought it was me.
No, I think it's breaking up. I don't know if it's like it's having a hard time connecting to the or like with the noise cancellation or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know either.
It might just be. I think it's kind of noisy where you're at, Scotty. So you might just try it.
Sounds like laundry.
Yeah.
No noise in here. I'm in my.
Is it mine? Can you guys hear my dishwasher?
Oh, is that what I hear?
It maybe, I guess. I thought I had the noise cancellation on. But...
Well, yeah, that's fine. As I like to tell people who like to leave comments and complain about something, I'm like, you're watching this for free, and we're obviously not in the same room. So if there's connection issues, like it happens. Like who cares? Get over it.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm purposely like having Steven do dishes now and it comes through, or Scott has mic issues. Like I chose that. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. Sorry.
No, but on Coward, like it was really a fun process, and I think everything that Steven talked about, like I would definitely confirm in terms of it being equally joyful and amazing, but also a little bit stressful. Plus, like Steven, you were pretty new to like producing bands at that time too, right? So
yeah, I had never done anything that was metal. Everything that I was doing was like indie. But yeah, I had still been doing it for a while. So I think the hardest part of doing that record was trying to schedule people who had full-time jobs and, just couldn't like make much time for it. So it was like, cool. All right, I've got 2 days with you. Don't blow out your voice kind of thing. It's like, and of course, gets blown out. Like, so yeah. That's
and also that was the first record that we self-produced. So Steven was the producer on that record. And to be totally honest with you, like Haste the Day has kind of always been a band that we need someone to like come in and like structure everything for. Like we need to be told. We always had to have a manager. I mean, Mark was essentially like a member of the band. I mean, that is how vital he was to like Haste the Day functioning. Because we just have never really been the most put together like group of individuals. So I think just self-producing it also was like a bit of a challenge. Like we always had top producers on the other records that could organize everyone and like do the scheduling, and I think that everyone would see those people as kind of like, oh, they're the authority, so we have to listen to them. And it can be challenging when it's like one of the members that's doing that. And, that just brings in a different dynamic where I'm not saying anyone like didn't listen to Steven, but I'm just saying it was like a new experience of having that dynamic shift.
And like doing, because we would all, with every Haste the Day record up until that one, we'd be in the studio for a month straight. Yeah. And that was all we were doing. So it was like, we'd be in there and you wake up and you record until you go back to the hotel and go to sleep. And with this, it was like, that was what I was doing. Like, cause that I was like, where I worked on that record for 6 weeks straight, but like all to everybody else, they just had like their little part. So it'd be like, okay, cool. When can you come down to Nashville? And we all live in different states. So it's like, impossible to like get us all in one place all at one time. Even still today, I mean, now like doing Burn and like recording the new stuff, it's all very remote. And you know, Scotty and Dave will fly to Nashville for a little bit and we'll do guitars, but you know, Brennan does his vocals, and he's been in Ohio, and you know, it's just kind of all over the place. Giuseppe recorded his own drums in like his drum shop that he works at in Pittsburgh in between tours. So yeah, again, it's just like a lot of like scheduling and getting tracks from people. But I actually, it's kind of part of my work, like what I do normally now. So it's like, now it's just kind of the way people make music. It's like,
Yeah.
It's weird how that kind of happened.
Yeah. Technology, you know, like it, you know, there's benefits to it. Allows for a little bit more freedom. And then I think you referenced another thing, John, which is like Coward was special because I think the vision for it was to kind of have all eras of the band involved, like on one project, which was obviously amazing. But that was kind of like the unifying vision for like why we wanted to do it. And that is challenging in and of itself because there just are different eras of the band, you know, there's still Haste the Day fans that are like diehard Jimmy fans, and we'll just never let that go. And so we wanted to, you know, do something special for that and recognize that is a big part of Haste the Day's story. So it was important that Jimmy was involved. It's important to get Jason and Devin involved on it. And obviously that brings with it challenges. And it's like not so much of an issue, I think, anymore. You know, like now our vision for what we're doing is a little bit different and a little evolved. And really it's a product of, like we were talking about earlier, and what Scotty was saying is that everyone has kind of done a lot of self-discovery in terms of identity and what everyone's individual relationship is to the band, and everyone having like probably a healthier mindset and perspective. It does change the dynamic for the better, and it makes things a lot easier. But when we did Coward, like some of that process had happened, but not all of it. And so that's where it got a little bit different is we were all trying to approach this with, you know, the same vision, but we all hadn't done the same amount of like, you know, our journeys didn't all look kind of the same in terms of progress. So that was probably what made it a little bit challenging.
I think something that's interesting for me, you know, kind of having ridden through, I'll say all the eras, given the nature of like that I only live a few hours away from you guys, like we were saying before, we're recording Story Friends, so it's like those are your guys' homies. So it's like seeing you guys and knowing of you, it's, you know, it almost feels like you're kind of a local to Michigan band, but you're not. Just probably like Still Remains, probably felt, or Chicago or like the surrounding Midwest areas all felt like secondary homes for everybody because you're so close to proximity of where you actually reside. The thing that I always thought was kind of interesting is, and you know, and I say this and it takes away from nobody or anyone's contributions or anything, but to me, I think what was interesting is I remember obviously one of the first times getting to really see the band consistently was once Steven had taken over, especially right around the time of Pressure the Hinges coming out. And it just felt like, from my perspective, that the band was finally able to do more with melody, like especially vocal melodies and such, because Steven has more of a dynamic range, singing, screaming, all that kind of stuff. And I feel like as time went on, collectively, you guys really kind of harnessed that, really leaned into the sake that Steven has such a wider range than Jimmy did. But I wonder if when you're kind of writing stuff subconsciously, are you guys all like, Haste the Day has to be this? Or do you feel so confident in your own playing, what you bring to the table, that you can allow it to morph and not feel like people are going to not like it because it's not what they think the band is versus what you all collectively in it feel like it is and what you want it to be?
Well, thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. I mean, I know that our vision, like going into this time, has been to write the best metalcore that we can write, and labeling it as that. Like, this is a metalcore album, this is a metalcore band, and we're doing that. However, I don't think we've ever shied away really from like also doing what we want to do. I mean, even like I know even like going back to Dreamer, there are those weird tracks that I put in there, Labyrinth and an Adult Tree and Porcelain, and like I wanted to be in like a
Some of my favorite tracks.
band. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
And it was just like
those are some of my favorite tracks.
And you had metal on that album, and you also had like that kind of post-hardcore sound on certain tracks, and we did that with Wolf King with White as Snow, just kind of pushing the boundaries. Like, it's still, of course, it still fits in that box. Like, and we all can do stuff outside of this if we want to scratch an itch of like a different genre. And also, I don't think any of us are afraid of like stepping outside of that box for a track or two tracks or a part or whatever we want to do, because ultimately this is a creative an artistic expression, and we also have to like feel it and be interested in what we're creating. So yeah, I don't know, do you guys have anything to say about that?
Yeah, can you guys hear me any better, by the way?
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Currently, yes. Now, way better.
Sweet. Awesome. Yeah, I mean, when I first joined the band, I remember being at your house, Steven, and trying to write some new songs with you. And I remember the mindset of like, oh man, I'm a new member and I get to write songs in this band. I better write Haste the Day songs. Like, I remember that feeling. And I remember writing the shittiest songs from that mindset. Like, I remember one song, I wrote this whole thing with the kind of mindset of like, ooh, it's kind of when everything falls ish, it'll bring some old, and and we didn't use the song. It was this kind of cliche metalcore song. And I remember then realizing, like, letting that go and just trying to bring what I bring to the band. And I think then I started writing Travesty, which I don't really know how to describe that. It's kind of a post-hardcore, but very melodic, very metalcore, guitar harmonies, just like totally true to my old band Phineas and the kind of music that I tend to write. And then we all collaborated on that and made it one of my favorite songs that we've ever written. So, I mean, all that to say, like, I've learned when I get out of the expectation of like making this sound like any certain thing that someone else wants, like, I write much better music. And I think that translates. Like, Burn is a song, our newest song, that I don't know, I really like. And it just came from a place of like, this is what I want to hear. This is good metalcore that kind of scratches the itch of all the elements I tend to like in heavy music. And I think it seems like people feel that, I think people respond when you write music from an authentic place. So I don't know, it's kind of a balance, like honoring what Haste the Day is, but also like kind of forgetting all of that at the same time and just making heavy music.
Yeah. Plus, well, also like, Jimmy has a very distinct scream like style, and one thing I don't think Steven's ever thought to himself like, oh, I need to like replicate what Jimmy does.
So when I joined the band, I asked them, I was like, do you want me to do the Jimmy thing? Like, because I totally will. I mean, I like revered Haste the Day. Like, we were me and Dave were in a band, and we like loved Haste the Day. And so I was going into it with the idea that I would just like do the like kind of Jimmy Zayo-ish kind of scream.
Raspy, yeah.
Yeah. And they told me not to. They were like, just do your thing. Just like, we want you because of you. Just do your thing. And I think that was kind of like Scotty, when you joined the band, just like you said, it was like, just do your thing and we can evolve.
Yeah. And like, and then, you know, like Jason is a great guitar player and is a great songwriter. I've never actually, I don't think I've ever come across anyone that can like play in the same style that Jason plays. He has, it's like super unique, just the way that he just, I don't know if it's like his picking dynamic or what it is, but it is a very,
I was going to
like,
say,
unique.
you're almost talking about Jordan Whalen. Like if you watch how he plays, his like right picking hand, it's uniquely him. Like I've even tried learning some of the old Stilly riffs, and I'm like, this feels weird. Like it's not how I would attack this. And it's funny when you start kind of picking that apart of somebody where you're like, I could mimic what you're doing, but I'll never play like you because it's so uniquely you.
Exactly. And that's like something I love about Jason's playing is I don't know how he does it. Like, I mean, Scotty is probably like the best guitar player I've ever like been able to play with, but like he wouldn't like, doesn't mimic Jason's style. That's just kind of like unique to Jason. And it's one of those things where it's like, it almost would like do a disservice to Jason to try and just like be another Jason. You know, because it's like an imitation of something is not as good as the actual thing. So I think for all of us, it is important that we're not trying to like imitate, you know, what Haste the Day was. I mean, like Steven said, we were huge fans of the band before we were in the band. And so it's all like that always is going to hold a special place in my heart. And I have like the utmost respect for, you know, the music that came before us. And to me, it's like, it would like be bad if we just tried to like, you know, be an AI version of like Haste the Day, you know, like someone just tells Scotty like, all right, dude, I'm going to give you a, you know, Scotty GPT prompt of, you know what I mean? Like, all right, play Jason's style. Like, it's just going to be an imitation. It's not going to be as good as what Jason would do if he were writing it. And so I think that just like ties into what Scotty was saying, where I think it is very important for music to be authentic and not an imitation. And that's, I feel like that's how you get the best result. I still think it's important to recognize what you're doing. And like, you know, I don't think any of us are going to decide one day that we want Haste the Day to be like, you know, a classic rock band, or, you know, now we're just going to go on like full on, like Nada Surf, like indie rock or whatever, because that's just not what we do. So I think it does have to be authentic and come from a like a real creative place, while still recognizing like what the band is. And like, you know, like Steven said, we are a metalcore band, and there's things that we enjoy about that genre of music that we can express creatively what we want to express inside of that, but it doesn't have to be like a box that we put on ourselves to do it. So, and that's why I'm personally excited about the new stuff that we're writing. Is it's to me like feeling like the most authentic for all of us music that we're creating, and I think the result is that it's also the best music that we're creating. So
I think too, like as far as identity goes, we actually know ourselves and we know what Haste the Day is. I feel like we're more comfortable and like grounded in what we are. Like Steven, you saying we're a metalcore band, whereas I feel like when we made Coward, there was this kind of like, like we all wanted to be in an indie rock band, and we had this kind of unfulfilled I don't know, creativity of like, we didn't want to be in this genre. I know I felt that way. Like, I don't want to be pigeonholed in this genre. Like, there's this kind of frustration or just boredom. Like, I want to be creative outside of metal. And that was fine. I think we wrote some really great songs at that time that I love, but I feel like we're much more grounded in like, okay, we've had enough time apart. I mean, we've all been in different projects. Steven composes, like I've done a shoegaze band. We've done so much other creative outlets that I think we're more accepting of what the band is. As far as like, okay, here's our general genre, like Dave said, but then that allows us to be super creative and free. And it's not like we're trying to not be something or trying to be something. I think we're just more grounded in like, hey, this is heavy music and very melodic music, and it feels real. And I don't know, I think we've like really found a good like settling place for our identity. At least I feel that way, which is really cool.
You know, you said something in there, Scott, that I feel like is really indicative of just getting older and understanding who you are and your boundaries and your non-negotiables and all those things that you kind of hopefully come to learn as you get older. I know, like for myself, like I think that's why it gets interesting sometimes going back and listening to music or listening to bands I grew up with. And as I get older, kind of get some more pieces or more comfortable with me or therapy under my belt or something that I'll pick up on these things maybe I just couldn't previously. But I almost feel like, I mean, listening to you all talk now, it's like, I could feel that. I could feel that in all the music you guys are putting out, that it's, you were aware because you were fans of this band that you didn't want to come in and just shit on the legacy that was before because you were fans. But I don't necessarily feel like you got that fair shake from the fans back to you, because I think there was an expectation of what it was or what it was supposed to be from them versus just enjoying what you're presenting because you had all gotten the blessing and okay to continue on. And I think that that's sort of something that gets a little lost sometimes as we get older, where it's like we feel so personally connected to these things that it's almost like anything beyond how we know it. It's like a divorce almost, kind of like we take it as like a divorce. Like so much of our culture is, you know, our parents are divorced, or, you know, celebrity people are not together, or, you know, look at Outkast, like one of my favorite groups. And it's like, for the most part, Big Boy and Andre 3000 don't do anything together anymore. And you're kind of like, man, it's so sad because like you were a tight knit group. You are part of my childhood. You raised me essentially on some of these things, taught me about different types of music and how to be. And so when you see, I think that the change, I think especially so young in our lives, it almost feels like it's like the world coming down on us and we just don't know how to react to it. So we kind of react in a negative fashion versus, I think, like a lot of people that are probably my age, a little bit older, that are into the band, where it's like, I can step back now. I've addressed my own shit. I can kind of look back and go, you know what? I didn't like Attack of the Wolf King initially. I really wasn't into pop music, so I hated the cover, the Black Eyed Peas cover. I just wasn't into that.
You're not alone.
But I love that song, but I also loved that song to begin with. So to me, that song was always great, and I always loved the almost ad-libbing that was kind of happening in it to replace the ad-libs in the song. But
that was all. Yeah, that was all Mike. He had such a fun time doing that.
But I mean, like, to me, it's like when you listen to that, I don't know how you may not like the song, it may not be your genre. I get all of that, but to me, it's like, how do you listen to that where you can literally hear the smiles on people's faces as they're doing their vocal takes and stuff? And it's like, how do you hate that? You can tell this band was having so much fun doing that. And again, I come back to a comment I've made a couple of times over the last few chats I've done this week, where it's like, man, I just grew up at a time where if something wasn't for you, you just ignored it and just moved on, and it was fine. Like, it didn't have to cater to everything for you.
Yeah, dude, that's such a great point, man. Like, and I think that is a big perspective that Steven has now, that we've all adopted as a band, which is like, look, the reality is you're not going to please everyone. You know, like, you can't please everyone. And actually, by trying to please everyone, you're not going to put out the best thing that you can put out, because not everyone agrees on anything, literally anything. There's not 100% of people that think the same thing about anything. So especially when it comes to music, and, you know, I think it's important to recognize it is a very personal thing for people, and they're totally, you know, within their rights to have opinions about what they like and don't like. And that's totally fine. I've got opinions about music that I like or don't like, you know, but that doesn't diminish the importance of what that person's making. It just means that, like, it's not for me and I don't have to listen to it. You know, if people don't like the music that Haste the Day makes, which there's plenty of those people out there, that's cool. You know, like they've got their favorite bands, and I love that for them. And it's like, yeah, then we're not making this for you. Like you're, you know, it's not your thing. That's totally fine. I think being accepting of that is very freeing for us too.
Yeah. Definitely. And I think that, I mean, I am so guilty of this, like, but music is so emotional in the sense that, like, when I fall in love with a record, I feel some weird ownership over it. And I really do feel like if the next album that they put out isn't equally as amazing, which it never can be, because you've like put this album on a pedestal, like, because it got to you at the right time, it spoke to you in the right phase of life, and you connected with it on some like mental and spiritual level, you know, then you feel almost like what you said, like a divorce, or like you feel abandoned, like, oh, why would you abandon me? I still need this thing. And I have to remember that when we put out music, because, and of course I've grown since earlier days where like I really invested in these albums, and you know, almost worshiped different bands and different albums, like, because of that connection that I had to them. But I have to remember and think back to those times that I did idolize those albums, when I'm like, you know, seeing reactions or whatever of new music. It's like, there's no possible way we're going to make everybody happy. Like, and there's no possible way that, you know, it's that what we are doing is going to mean as much to them as it is to us making it. And honestly, that's the only thing that I'm concerned about. Do I like it? Do we as a group love and back what we're doing? And if the answer is yes, then it doesn't matter. Like, now, with that said, the reaction to Burn has been blowing us away, and it's been awesome. But yeah, that's the most important question that we have to answer for ourselves, is like, do we love this? And does this, like, do our performances, does this song, does this composition, like, represent where we are right now or what we're dealing with? And
but that's the thing too, that, like you say about the reception for Burn, it's been so positive and so encouraging. I think that's a byproduct of when you make things that you actually love, then people respond to that. It's like Rick Rubin talks about this whole thing, like so many movies and songs and bands are made by people who don't believe in what they're doing. They're just trying to produce a product. And so that's why they're not very good. You know, people don't, well, some people like it, but it's not the same as making art from a place of like, wow, I really love how this sounds, and I'm making it with my best friends. So I think we are truly doing that now. And it's really cool to see that the natural, like, byproduct of that is that other people feel that. And again, not everybody, like Dave says, you can never please everybody. And it's so freeing to kind of let go of that. And the people who will, it's like when Haste the Day started, like the band was doing what they loved, and that caught on and people felt that. And that's why the band exists. I think we're trying to just carry that on now. And the divorce metaphor is a good one, because I'm the same way. You get attached to the bands you idolize, just like your parents. And so if they split up, or, you know, mom's dating someone new, it's like, who's this person? Like, I get that kind of reaction, but at the same time, it's like, I don't know, it's possible to honor that time of your life and move on and grow and be in something new. So I don't know, I think that's all good stuff.
I've really been like attached to this thing. It's so obvious when you really start breaking it down, but it's one of those things, like, maybe it's just because my wife and I travel a little bit more consistently now that I keep hearing this. But it's like when you're on a flight and they always say you got to take care of yourself, put your own mask on before you take care of somebody else. And I feel like I apply that same analogy to so many different facets of my life where it's like I have to take care of me first because I'm worth nothing to anyone else if I don't take care of me first. And I feel like obviously related to art or whatever, it all comes back to you got to do something here first. It has to come from within before it can come out. And then you expect anyone else to give a shit about what you're doing. And I think even beyond that, like, you know, Scott, you were actually, all of you were kind of saying about how you were trying to do something that you thought is what the band should be based on being an outsider. And, you know, I was, as you were saying that, I kind of was reminded I was living with someone at the time. And I was a fan of their band. And I was living with this person and they were kind of starting up a different iteration of the band. And so I had learned how to play bass. I'd learned how to play guitar. So when they were trying out different people, I could be the other person to fill out the sound. I then noticed that as I started jamming myself, I would write stuff and I'm like, this sounds cool. But I realized I was writing more like my roommate. I was writing stuff that I thought would be what he would want me to write. So I could act as like an equal or a counterpart or something. But it got to a point where I had to like literally sit there at one point. And I was like, do I even like what I'm writing? Or am I writing it because I want it to appeal to somebody else so they'll want to do something with me? And I realized like how disingenuous that was at the time. And that's just on a small level basement jamming where no one's probably ever going to hear it. And I had that epiphany 17, 18 years ago. And I realized from that point forward, it's like, I have to, again, you just kind of have to be authentically who you are. But that just takes time in understanding who you are. It takes time in communicating to others, maybe your insecurities, your fears, how to become better as a group and just communicating. Because I mean, as much as we all will joke about this, but it's like, it's a marriage. It's a big relationship that it's like you're leaving everyone behind and it's the 4 or 5 of you against everybody. And if you have insecurities and fears and stuff like that, I'm sure they manifest when you're writing or when you're on the road or whatever. And, you know, it's funny that imposter syndrome is now a thing I think everyone talks about. But it's been so weird because it's like it's something I've addressed and known I've have a problem with for so long that it almost feels weird when I hear people that I like doing this where I'm like, holy shit, dude, like you also felt this way, but you are you and you've done all these things. Like how do you have the same experience as I do? But it then brings it all back that it's like we all have common bonds and things that ground us all together. So it's interesting to kind of hear how you all have navigated your tenure in the band, what the band means to you, how you're still cognizant of these things moving forward. Because I think if people were not aware, I think it still shows that you still care. And it's a big thing that I talk about now, which is finding your why. There was a brief time doing this podcast. I got tired of it because I had to listen to music that I thought I loved until it became a job. And then it was like, okay, I'm talking to you guys. I'm one of 17 today. What can I talk to you about the same thing that everyone else is going to that's completely different or a different perspective than anyone else? And when you start doing that consistently enough, you're like, I don't want to fucking do this anymore. I'm tired of it. I don't even think I like this music anymore. And it's just going through the motions. And then there was a point where I kind of refound my why. And it was like, oh, this is it. This is why I do it. This is what it gives me. And again, it started here. And then since then, I think the show has become better because I've understood it has to start here. If I feel about what I just did, everyone else probably is too.
Yeah, I think that something that you said made me think of all of that is so good. The why, like we've talked about that coming back to the band, like why are we actually doing this? And all of us have slightly different answers. And I think there was a time period where we thought that our why had to be collective, had to all be the same. And we're realizing now that like it doesn't have to all be the same. Like we can all have different whys and we're going to come together for the same thing, for the same goal. But all of our like motivation and getting into this is just slightly different. I think it overlaps a lot, but like we are all individuals in this one thing moving forward, and I just think that that's beautiful, and that's why it's so special at the shows. That's why it's so special, like coming together and making music again, because I get to learn from Dave's why, and I get to learn from Scotty's why, and that like, you know, teaches me things and gives me life. And I would venture to say that they do the same for mine, you know, and I don't know if that makes any sense as it does in my head, but
Totally.
and then the other thing, no, you go ahead. I'll bring this up later.
No, go ahead. I was just gonna say totally, man. Everything you're saying makes so much sense. Like, it gives me chills because that's the feeling of belonging I've always felt in this band. It's because I know you guys and we're close, and so like we know each other's why. We know who we are, and so like we're all on stage playing a song that we wrote together at 3 a.m. in your house, and or you wrote lyrics that are about, you know, deeply personal things in your family, and it resonates with things in my own family, like, and then you go on stage and you perform that song all as this unit with totally different backgrounds and different emotions, and but you're all doing it at the same time for the same goal. Like, it's like a huge kind of spiritual belonging thing that I love about what you're saying. So I don't know, that got me pumped.
I think the other cool thing too, Scotty, that I just thought of while you were saying what you were saying is that it's like so cool to have our individual, like, why we're doing this. And then on the other side of it, I think the thing that makes like performing the music and putting the music out there is what I'm learning is that people have different whys for why they like it or why it resonates with people. Like, there is a podcast that we stumbled upon called Church Jams, and they like, or I think it's called like Church Jams Now or something. So shout out to those dudes. But they basically reviewed Attack of the Wolf King. But it was like such a cool thing for us to listen to, because like the dude that like he was like the guest on the podcast, and he brought the album for them to all listen to and like review. But they like went super in depth, like track by track, and all of them like resonated with different parts of the album, like different sets of lyrics, or like this song resonated with one of them for like this reason that was totally different from someone else listening to it for a different reason. And I think that's what's cool about music in general, is it really can bring people together with that have totally different whys, you know, for like why they're listening to it or why it's impactful to them. So it's like both for us, like in the band, that's important, and I think it's also important for the people that are like listening to it or going to a show and, you know, getting a beer dumped on their head, you know, after twisting their ankle or whatever it is. Like all of that, it just ties together, and it is just such a like transcendent thing, I think. But like, yeah, the why is always like, I think, the most important question.
So what I was going to say really quick, something you said made me think of this, and I think it was just like the intention of the artwork, right? Like what are we trying to accomplish? And one of the reasons why Christian movies suck so bad is because, you know, the only thing they're thinking about is converting somebody, right? So like there is no focus on like, what am I trying to change in myself? Like, it's what am I going to try and change in someone else? And I know this is kind of going back to what we were talking about before, but if you don't start with what do I need to change about myself, or what am I trying to connect with in myself that I can't express in words, or I can't express without expressing it in art, you're going to end up with a shitty Christian movie. Like, and it's going to be something that falls short, and it doesn't actually convert anybody. and it doesn't actually like do anything. But if I can tell my story, and if I can tell, like, if we can tell our stories, if we can tell how we're trying to change, then, that might, that might inspire somebody else or whatever, it's just, and that's kind of my heart in that.
Yeah, actually, Steven, that reminds me, because I think tying in that and kind of the why question, it's like this idea of, I think the foundation often really has to be, what is your relationship with yourself? That is really, like, to me, the way I see forming an identity, something I've been going through the last several years, and even, longer than that, since like my whole life. But I've really started to only recently form like a healthy relationship with myself, where that's not dependent on what my relationships with other people look like. So what I mean by that is, like, am I getting validation internally, like for myself, based on a healthy relationship with myself, or am I trying to seek out external validation and basing my identity off what my relationship looks like to other people? And I think as a band, it applies there as well, because, kind of tying back what we were discussing earlier is, are we making music just because we want external validation from the fans, right? Or, like, to put it in like the marriage, divorce, or like dating terms, I think when you're younger and you haven't formed a good sense of identity, you basically form a version of yourself that is the version that, like, the person you want to date would want to be with, right? But that's completely not authentic to, like, who you actually are. And obviously those dating relationships don't last very long, because that can only go so far, like, you can only manufacture a version of yourself for so long, and then it's not real, so it's going to fall apart eventually. And I think that's what that translates to music as well, where, like, if it's not authentic and coming out of a place of, like, your relationship with yourself, it's not going to be real. And that does come across, I think, in the final product, And so it's like, if you're writing music just because you want everyone to like it, probably, as Steven is saying, like, then probably no one's going to like it, like, it's just going to be a bad version of it. And that doesn't work.
Yep.
I have Steven, you kind of made me think of something as you were just kind of talking there, talking about, I'm kind of paraphrasing to sort of get to my question, but, you were sort of saying that, like, people looking for things from you, before you kind of going back to, you got to help yourself before you can help others, and creating things for yourself instead of for others, because it's disingenuous. And I guess this actually kind of goes to all of you, but I figure it probably lands on Steven more being the vocalist, and people are going to probably resonate and talk to you about this. Do you feel that there was sort of a reconciliation, like you had to be this moral compass, this something for people because of the scene that in the community that you all kind of grew up in and fostered? Did you ever feel that, like, on the weight of that on from people?
Yeah.
And did it subsequently affect maybe writing that you were trying to do? I would assume maybe on Pressure the Hinges ish, if there was.
I think that is such a great question. And and this is something that, so, like, being raised in the church, and, my dad is a pastor, and, ministry was a big part of our family. Going into the band, I was just writing, and I kind of always did this. I always would just write from my own perspective, because that's the only perspective that I know. However, there really is, like, as far as writing, I've always only written from my perspective. Like, it's the only thing that I'm good at writing. There was a stint there where, when I moved to Nashville, I was like, I'm going to try and get into the country writers around kind of deal and like make it big as a country writer because I can make some money that way. I couldn't write even one song because it was not my perspective. And I did I did all these writing sessions with other writers and I just hated it so much because it was not my perspective. And so I've kind of always written from that. However, there is so much pressure being in a quote unquote Christian band to uphold this like godlike state. And if you fail, or if you show that you fail, everybody fails. But like, if you show the world your failure, like you are cast out or ridiculed online. There was even a moment where someone thought that I said shit in Pressure the Hinges. No, it was Dreamer. They thought, no, maybe it was, I don't say the B word, but maybe it was the B word. And it was not what I said, but I got like slammed on MySpace, right? Like, because
not my top 8 anymore, Steven.
I know, yeah, and it was just like, and it like broke their hearts, because they thought that I'm like supposed to be some, and of course I didn't say it, but also it was like, you're throwing these kids into this place of like honor and reverence and like ministry. It's like, we aren't priests, we aren't pastors, we're musicians, and we're just here telling you as we see it. Like, that's it. Like, don't take anything that we say as law. Like, we're just expressing the like what we're experiencing, and you can like go through like Haste the Day lyrics, and some of them don't make any sense at all that I've written, but some of them are just my heart just being poured out of just like what I'm going through and the way I feel, and you can kind of follow that journey throughout. But yeah, there is this weird pressure of being in a Christian band, and just like, especially, it's not as much anymore, but at that time period, it was hard. And I think, the reason why, like, you see people going so against that, like, so against, like, being spiritual at all, that's because they're sick of just being put on a pedestal. Like, don't put me on a pedestal. Right. I'm just a person just like you are, but I'm just telling you how I feel through my music.
Either of you guys, Dave or Scott?
Yeah, I would definitely resonate with everything Steven says. And, I think with the Christian thing, it's tough too, because I do understand, where a lot of those people come from. Like I grew up in the church, and I remember growing up, it was like, oh, this is a Christian band, so it establishes this kind of like foundation of connection. But on the other side of that, like Steven says, it's easy to like idolize these people. You think they're like a prophet sent from God, and like that level of authority that you allow them to have in what they're saying and the music that they make and everything. And to me, that is very dangerous, because that's just not the case. Like the reality is, like, all of these people are musicians, and they're expressing things that ideally are like real to them. And so I understand the connection there, right? Like, I understand why, because I was that kid, like in middle school and early high school, like, oh, this band is going to be more important to me than this non-Christian band because, oh, they agree with what I believe, which is, to be honest, like, I don't think the best way of approaching music. But I understand that is a real thing. And I think that's in this era of the band, something that we're really having to like figure out as a group of what is our identity as it relates to Christianity, because the fact is not all of us in the band are Christians. And so there's this like kind of tension between wanting to be authentic as a band and then individually wanting to be authentic in whatever, spiritual walk path we find ourselves on, which transparently is very different between all the band members. So that has definitely changed. I will say it hasn't been like Steven said, it's not like a complete rejection. Like we're not like an anti-Christian band now. There's nothing like that. But it is something that we've had to like put conscious thought into and have discussions about what that looks like and why. And yeah, I mean that what you guys are talking about with your question, John, the Christian thing does put a different dynamic on it, because it sets this like level of almost a little bit strange like expectations on what people think that you should be and how they think that you should act, and like what lyrics are appropriate, if this is like, I mean, does this talk about Jesus enough? Does, you know what I mean? It's just this weird, this like weird thing,
which is really funny, because like if you look at like my previous lyrics, like I never, it's not like I was talking about Jesus.
Are we
Like,
talking
it
about
was
like New Day Awakening or even like earlier Haste Today stuff?
I mean,
probably.
ever. Like,
Yeah.
like,
Okay.
I mean, it's like, I talk
Yeah.
about my own experience. I might talk about a story or something that, speaks to me, but nothing is like overt. I can think of a handful, Chorus of Angels maybe is like a very like Christian lyric, but yeah, I mean, like full transparency, it's like I don't want you to take anything from my lyrics other than like what you are feeling from them. You know what I mean? Like, I don't care if you like, I have no agenda with my lyrics. And actually one thing that I think is really cool, and it just shows the difference in the time previous, like where like people are reaching out to me more kind of on the deconstructed side of Christianity, and asking me honestly, like I've had people ask me like, hey, I've come out of this like church trauma or whatever, and like your lyrics, like, they kind of kept me in that church trauma or something like that. Like, and I had to like talk to him about this, like this thing that he was asking me, like, do you believe in this, this, and this? And like, although I still identify as a Christian, my beliefs have changed drastically throughout the years, because I think that that's what is supposed to happen. You're supposed to have a journey, in your life. Like, and I'm trying to figure it out just like anybody else is. But being able to have a conversation with this person and say like all of these questions that you just gave me, you're not alone. Like, we have these questions too. I have these questions. And also I might not identify with the like lyrics that I wrote when I was 21, or 22. Like, I'm 37, almost 38 now. Like, that was a long time ago. And I was going through something specific and dealing with it through the theology and understanding of God that I knew at the time. And all of that, not all of it, but a lot of it has changed drastically since then. And like, I was able to be like, hey, look, like the stuff that I sang then was about then, and it doesn't reflect now. And also, like, our only message as a band has ever been love. Like, so if you took anything other than love, like, that you can disregard it now. Like that was unintentional.
Mm-hmm.
Scott, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's all great. I relate to all that. I don't know. It's like, I think people are, like Steven, you said, we're meant to go on a journey. I think we change, people grow, we develop. That's part of what gives my life meaning, is seeking and changing, and that brings creativity. So I feel like if there's an agenda, like if I have to write music that sounds like XYZ, or if I had to write lyrics that are about this theology or any topic, when you get pigeonholed like that, to me as an artist and as just a human, that feels so bad. That's like such a trapped, like, that's like the death of the self in a dramatic way. It's like, I want to be myself and be free to change. I think that's the role of art, is to kind of ruffle feathers and like promote change, and that's kind of in conflict with people want stuff to stay the same. Like people want us to sound like Haste the Day in 2003. People want the lyrics to always, be about this, and it's such a frustrating thing to come up against as a person, as an artist, because yeah, I think we're meant to change and grow, and that's not a bad thing. I would encourage people that changing and growing your beliefs and who you are and the music you like that's a great thing. Like that brings a lot of joy to my life, and over the years, like I don't write lyrics in the band, so I write music, but over the years deconstructing my own beliefs growing up, and I'm a therapist now, and I work with a lot of clients who come to me who are deconstructing religious beliefs, religious upbringings that was traumatic for them and caused all kinds of shame. And I love doing that work because I love seeing, again, people be authentic instead of having to be what any religion or anybody else says you should be or are supposed to be, or what's good and bad. I don't know. So I'm just kind of ranting about it here, but I think it all ties into being authentic, and yeah, and that doesn't mean you have to stick with any one thing. I think it means we grow and change, and our musical tastes change, our feelings change. Like, we just grow as people.
I think for me, kind of where I started really coming to that idea, that concept of like, I don't want to say others kind of putting their own shit on you, but essentially it's that. But I had the epiphany a while ago, like talking to my tattoo artist, and I just had this, we were talking, and I remember him talking about, I was like, tattooing has changed over the last, just like almost any industry, it's just changed. It used to be very gatekeepy, very much like metal and stuff like that. Like if you didn't have your entry point, you weren't getting into that world. But I remember, now with the reality TV shows of like tattooing and stuff, it seems like the culture of it changed to where instead of just getting fun things, something dumb or whatever, like a quick little tour tat or like a friendship tattoo, everything had to be like, this is for this very heavy, traumatic, life-altering thing that happened to me. And it almost seemed like that's what tattooing became for a little bit. And I remember kind of making the comment to him, like, it just seems like that's where it's at. Is it kind of hard for you to like navigate an industry where it's like, yeah, I'm just blasting tats and da-da-da. And then now you're getting these stories that, it's like, and I'm not talking out of turn because he literally said this on the podcast years ago, but a story of like an older lady getting her first tattoo, and it's this big piece, and he's just politely like, you're this old, why are you getting a tattoo now? Oh, this is to remind me of, I was in an abusive marriage with my husband or my ex-husband for like 2 decades or whatever, and this is the thing for me that I finally got out of it, and it's to remind myself that I'm strong and all these things. And I was like, dude, like, that's really heartbreaking to hear that. And if that's your day every single day, 2 to 3 times a day for a week, what do you do with that? Because people are essentially treating you like cut rate therapy, where it's like, it's it's not lessening their experience, and it's cool that you're getting to add to the story, and like I totally feel that way. But I would just wonder, how does it affect you when you're hearing these stories all day long, and maybe you don't want to go home to your significant other to burden them with this weight that you just got dumped on. And if you're doing that every single day, what is that doing to your mental capabilities? Does it even make you want to do the job anymore? Because it's not a fun thing anymore. And I feel like once I kind of tapped into that for a minute, I was like, it's got to be the same for you guys, where it's like maybe a song that you wrote where you cleanse that thing for yourself. Now everyone's coming to you because you gave them that permission, that access to tap into that and expel it. But then they're coming to all of you and telling you that. And it's like, okay, you're one of 1,200 people maybe that just did that tonight. And then I got to get into a van and I got to think about that in the darkness. And then I do it tomorrow and I do it the next day. And it's like, I just kind of get wrapped up in this idea of like, how do we navigate this when you have to be somebody for somebody else? And it's because people feel that comfortable enough to come to you and tell you these things and about how it helps them. But I just wonder, what does it do to the person that has to take that on? And so to me, I'm not trying to say that it's a bad thing or that, you know, having religion or whatever is a bad thing. I just feel like maybe in a differing way, whereas I look at my friend like a cut rate therapist of sorts, I almost feel like you have to be these, you know, pastors, preachers, you have to be all of these things for your fan base. And I feel like, I don't know if maybe people just don't realize they're doing that. And like, what does it do to you if that actually is something that you all went through?
I mean, I can speak to that a little bit. But I would say that, I mean, for me, at least coming back to it, maybe there was a time where it weighed on me, but coming back to this, like, and the opportunity to be able to share deep experiences with people that I've never met, like, or maybe I've met them several times at shows and been able to like walk with them and like hear their stories and all that stuff, like that to me, and maybe I'm weird, it's not all the time, yeah, but like it's life-giving to me, like to be able to like
Totally.
go up to somebody after a show and they tell me like their story and they tell me like this thing that I did almost passively did this thing in their lives, or like it's not lost on me the weight of that. But I think very often on those times, and I think that is like the true depth of life to me personally. Like I know that you know, our time is short, and I think through all of this political atmosphere, through all of this dualistic like framework that we have in America right now, to be able to sit with somebody and share their deepest like experiences is so incredibly beautiful to me, and that is so uniting. And it doesn't matter what they believe, it doesn't matter where they're at in their life, but to be able to be in that spot with them for a brief moment is incredible to me. And so, although I'm sure, like I'm sure for Scotty it might be different. I know he's a therapist and he's talking to people all day long. I'm not. I just get these brief moments with these people where it's like, it's heavy, it's hard, and it's also beautiful at the same time, to be able to like come together and just like be in that moment. So I don't know. It's a thing that I don't think everybody gets to experience, and I wish everybody could experience that. But yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I personally, I don't find it a burden in any way, or like a lot to hold, or I don't feel responsible. Like it's like for, I don't know, being a role model or being something that being someone that's held to a higher standard than anyone else. It's quite the opposite. I feel like I write music it's like this magic where you just channel all this, for me, like anxiety and depression and trauma and life stuff. I get to channel it and write music out of it, and then collaborate with these guys, and you all put your piece to it, and we all are a band expressing ourselves that way. And then I get to go on stage and just unleash that and feel totally free, and it's cathartic and expressive. And then the fact, like, it's almost like if someone comes up to me after a show and talks about a song and how meaningful it was to them, it's almost like almost a shock or a surprise to me. Like, I almost forget that other people are affected by it, which sounds obvious, but I think I'm so lucky enough to get to express myself through music. It's so healing for me. So I'm not like holding myself to a standard of anyone looking up to me. If anything, it's just to let people know you can express yourself too, and you don't have to hold it all inside, whether that's through music or through whatever form. So when people are like come up and are saying like, oh, this song helped me through this, it's kind of like, wow, I never even imagined that would be possible. And it's really humbling to think something that helped me heal is helping someone else heal. So if anything, it's like a common humanity. It's not like, oh, we're the teachers here with we're not on a pedestal. It's more like I'm humbled to know I'm part of the world, I'm part of humanity, and we can all relate. So if anything, it helps me with my own like depression and anxiety to feel connected to other people. I don't know. So that's one of my favorite. I didn't always feel that way. I think being a therapist has given me a different perspective. So now that we're in the band again, it's like, oh, wow. I'm just grateful I get to use it as a healing tool for myself, really.
Absolutely.
You said common humanity, and I love that term.
Yeah. Like, because John, like, I totally get what you're saying, because I guess like the idea of it being a burden, it's not like necessarily like a bad thing. I think what Stephen was referencing, where you do feel like the weight of the meaning, of like these experiences that people have. And again, like the common humanity, and transparently, that is why that's my why for like doing the band stuff. It really does all center around the idea of like human connection, because on one hand, it is very life-giving for me to connect with. We're all very close friends in the band. That's another like special thing. I think like me and Steven have been, as you know, making music together for like how long now? 25 years. Something like 25
dude,
years.
really? Oh my gosh. Since my 9th grade year and your 10th grade year.
Yeah, so 24 years basically.
It's wild.
So almost a quarter century. But so like Steven is easily one of my closest friends, as is Scotty and Brendan and Mike and Giuseppe. And so that level of human connection is very special to me. And then it's also, again, like music is just so powerful because it does connect people, like fans and artists, or people that go to the show, people that perform. I remember like during COVID, like Aziz Ansari did a stand-up special, which is on Netflix. And he was talking, he like stopped the set and he was like, guys, let's just take a moment and just like kind of like soak this in, because you realize that like, we do shows, or I do shows, but like they're not all the same, because not all the people are the same. Like this moment in time, even doing this podcast, like this specific moment in time is unique. It's never going to happen again in this way, in this setting. And it's the same with playing a live show. We could play Indianapolis, like we played Indy like 4 times in a row last year, 4 nights in a row, right? It was, but it wasn't all the same people. A lot of them came to all 4 shows, but it was like every show was unique. it was a different experience, because it was different people there experiencing the music totally differently every single night. And that to me is the special thing about it, is it's like this opportunity to connect with people on a human level and hearing about their experiences. And yeah, maybe it's connected to the music that we're playing or the lyrics that Steven wrote or whatever it is. But to me, that is my why. Is it's just, I'm all about like community and like connecting with other people, because that is the best part to me about being human, is the fact that we do get to share life with other people. So the relationship between musicians and like people that are consuming the music, I think is super special, because it does impact everyone individually in different ways. And hearing about those experiences, yeah, it is like a weight because it's heavy, but that doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that it's like, it's like the realest real, you know what I mean? And so
Right.
that to me is what makes it special. And I would actually imagine it's the same for your tattoo artist, because also like not all of the experiences are negative. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
the example you gave, yeah, that is super heavy, right? Being in an abusive relationship for a really long time, that's one end of the spectrum. That's like a heavy experience. And then, there's times I can think of on the other side where it's not like a negative experience. It's like, I remember like there's been fans that told us that they like proposed to their girlfriend to like American Love or something, like, there's positive experiences too. And all of those, all of those are, I think, just special. So to know about those and to be able to connect with someone on that level, like through music, to me is the coolest thing that someone can do, like with the short time that we have on this planet. So
Yeah. And I actually find it all positive, whether it's the proposal or an abusive relationship, or someone says, hey, this song, I've had people tell me this song got me through a time I was suicidal, like super heavy stuff. I actually find it all positive, and in a way, it's heavy, but it all speaks to like, wow, so you went through that and you found something that helped you get through it. You found, if you had no one else in your life at the time, you had that album. And I know I felt that way. Like, so you found a song that related to what you were feeling. It maybe even kept you alive or helped you express something. That's something incredibly positive about people, that they like were resilient, So when I hear stories like that, even when it's heavy, it's always like positive to me and like life-giving. So it's like, wow, and I was part of it. Like even more humbling, like, wow, I was part of a song that I wouldn't say like, people say like music saved me or your song saved me, and I get what they mean, and I've felt that, but I feel like it's actually more like we all look to music and it pulls out something in us that survives and copes. And I don't know, like, so anyways, it's just, yeah, I'm not burdened at all by that stuff. It's more like so humbling, and it is a weight of like, wow, this is meaningful. Like this stuff really matters. And yeah, that feels really good to be part of.
Kind of to wrap this up, so I don't keep you guys too much longer in your evening. Something a little more fun, not so serious of a last question, but I also, we were kind of talking earlier about how sometimes as you grow, music can take on a different perspective, different meanings, and so forth. Coming back to the band and playing some of these old songs and stuff like that, have any of the old material, whether it was stuff that you were just a fan of and had nothing to do with writing it, and or stuff you did write, have you found new meanings in some of these old songs that you've played probably countless times and on an autopilot to a degree? Have you found new meanings in them over the years?
I like that question. I have, for sure. I don't know if I can have like specific things, but almost like every time we play a show, I feel a little different. Like a song, I don't know, brings out a little bit different feeling, or it takes on a new meaning, especially like 10 years later. So yeah, I answer your questions definitely yes. I don't know specifically if I could describe it, but every time we play, typically I don't go on autopilot. There's kind of something depending on the day and my mood and what's happened that week, or maybe a song transports me back to 10 years in the past. But that's something I love about playing the same songs over and over. Even though that can get monotonous, it actually doesn't. It's like there's something new to take from it, as long as you're open to it. I think it's easy to kind of shut off maybe and be like, okay, here we go again. But I don't feel that at all. I just feel like so excited to play now that it's like, yeah, I'm open to new meanings that the songs bring.
Well, I think too, I guess for me, like, yeah, like Scotty was saying, you know, you play the same songs over, like we played Blue 42 probably 1,000 times now, at least I have, literally 1,000. And, but Scotty's right. Like every time we play it, because I think it's the approach of like how you perform. Again, going back to again that question that you know, or that thing that you said earlier, which is like, what is the why? And I think for all of us, like the why of performing is it is a lot of like unique, individual, personal expression that, like Scotty was saying, it's like whatever happened that week, you may need to express something different, right? And you're bringing that onto stage and you're expressing that through like performing a song. So even if we've done it 1,000 times, like the next time we play Blue 42, I'm going to be expressing different things. You know, I'm going to be expressing like Scotty was saying, whatever was happening in my life that week or whatever I've gone through this year, you know, you bring that onto the stage with you. And so it comes across in the performance. And so, yes, I think playing the songs or relating to the songs changes daily, depending on what you individually need to express at that specific moment in time. You know, again, going back to like how different each of the 4 indie shows last year, even though we played 4 nights in a row, very similar set lists, like we alternated set lists like every day. It was a different performance every time because it was, you know, that performance was for that specific moment in time. And I had things that I was needing to express personally that changed day to day, you know, or even my.
Oh, we all back?
I'm back.
All right.
I'm here. There's
Go
Scott.
ahead. Scott again. There he is.
I'm here.
All right. So, Dave, you were still, I don't know if you had finished your thought or if you.
Well, coincidentally, that was actually the perfect timing to.
So-
what I was saying, so I was like, oh,
Good way to put it.
good. Yeah.
So I have 2 answers to this question.
Okay.
One is more fun. Like playing the old songs, like, okay, so just like Dave said, like we played Blue 42 thousands of times. Like, and maybe I like forgot how good that song is, but it is sick. Like, and it goes hard the whole time.
It's
like
going.
every time we play it, like it goes so hard. Like, and people get super into it. So I have so much fun with that song. And that's like usually at the end of the set, I take my ears out and I throw my pack over and just like, I can't hear anything. And it's awesome. Like, it's just like, just go crazy kind of deal. But a newer song that I guess it's one of those things where it's like, yes, I wrote the lyrics to this song, but I feel like I wrote the lyrics to this song for me now. Like, and that's the song Nah on Coward, and we've been playing the song. And I don't think when I wrote that song, it was as real as it is to me now, where it's like, I didn't ever go through depression or anything really that I remember before that. Since writing that song, I have, and I felt what anxiety feels like, and I felt like what depression from anxiety feels like, and those lyrics took on a new meaning for me. And it's funny because like when I listen to it now, it's like, how did I write that without having the context, like the true context for it? I mean, I feel it gnawing on the inside over and over again. Like that lyric is like, I know what that feels like now. And I don't know if I truly knew what that felt like then. And playing that live is like, I mean, Scotty, you said the word cathartic. Like that is the most cathartic song we could possibly play, where there is no choice but to release all of that emotion and that feeling, even if I'm like hearkening back to a time where, you know, that was hardest in my life, and being able to release that again and again on stage is, and it, I mean, none of it is fake. Like every time we play that song, it is exhausting because it is just dumping all of your feelings out on stage. And it sucks because we never play that song totally last. So I'm like completely spent after we play that song. And like, I know like Scotty goes hard during that song. Dave goes hard. Like we all go hard during that song. And like, yes, it ends with like this big epic breakdown, and probably people are like, yeah, this is fun. This is awesome. This is cool. But like on stage, like it is intense, like, and it is an intense feeling and release. And afterwards, like it's exhausting, but afterwards I feel so good that I was able to be able, like, just be able to like there is nothing in life quite like that, to be able to just freaking go for it and like put everything you have emotionally and into a positive release of emotion.
Dude, that's my why. And so like, I don't know if this is true or not, but like when you're talking, it gets me so stoked that like when I write music like that song, I am definitely, consciously or not, channeling depression and anxiety and trauma into the way the music feels. And I think maybe that's what's so cool about collaborating, is then sending it to you. You're writing lyrics based on, at least in part, the music, the way the music sounds and makes you feel. And so it's tapping into something else. And so like, it's so cool. Like, talk about new meaning. Like now you're relating to the lyrics you wrote that maybe were based at least in part on the music I wrote. And it's pulling out all this definitely cathartic, like rage and really raw emotion that feels so healthy to let that out. But I don't know, it gets me stoked because that's why I make music. Is I don't know, I wouldn't be okay without being able to channel that into something. And a song like that is the perfect song where I just is so cathartic. So I don't know, it gets me stoked to think that that music maybe inspired something in you that you wrote lyrics to that now relate to you in a new way, and me too. It's like, so that's such a good example.
That's the other thing too that I think is like amazing about being in a band and writing music as a band, is you basically get this idea of like 1 + 1 = 3 type idea, right? So it's like, Scotty, like what Scotty is going through and channels that into the music is like one thing. And then what Steven is going through and channels that into another part of the song, like whether it be lyrics or another riff or whatever it is is another thing, and the product of that is greater than the individual components of it, right? And then you add in what we're all releasing on stage. So when we play that song, it's more like a 1 + 1 = like 7 type idea, because it really is.
I would say 1,000. I would say
yeah, it is turned like, that's the thing, like playing that song, it is actually, it does feel insane. Like, it is crazy what it feels like on stage, because we're all individually channeling, all of the energy
Something.
and all of the emotion into it, and the product of that, like the way it comes across in performance, is really, it's like really hard to describe, like how intense it feels.
I'll leave you with this, and then I'll kind of have you plug all your socials and everything, or anything else you'd like to plug. But it's kind of serendipitous we're sort of talking about this and kind of ending on this, because it sounds negative the way I'm going to say this, and I don't mean it to be. A friend showed me a band in the last 6 to 8 months. This band called LLNN. They're a band from overseas. They write just like really, like, I remember listening to it, and I was like, if you remember the movie Event Horizon, like the first Aliens, like it feels like that. It feels like it was written inspired by that, but it's such a record that, like, and this record Unmaker, it's so heavy and like depressing, for lack of a better term, that it really kind of taught me to, and again, this just sounds so awful to say it like this, but it taught me that sometimes it's okay to like wallow in something that's negative and just the darkness, and really let it like take over. So when you're done with it, like when that record's done, I feel like I went through something. I don't know what it's tapping into. I haven't really gone that far into what it's pulling out of me. But again, it kind of reminds me of Event Horizon, because Event Horizon, there's literally hell in that. Spoilers, I guess. And then subsequently,
that
they just put out
so sick, by the way.
Me and Steven, well, me and
they
Steven
just put out an
into
EP. Go ahead.
Me and Steven got into Event Horizon when we were in high school, because there was a Zayo record that had a bunch of quotes from that movie, and we were like huge Zayo fans. So we were like,
what was the quote? It was on Liberate, I think.
Yeah, I can't remember what the quote was, but that's why we watched it. And then we were like, oh my god, this was. But actually, John, what you're talking about, dude, is like a scientifically backed idea, which is that, and I only learned this like very recently through a bunch of reading. Scotty probably knows more about it than I do, but like emotions, like feelings, are actually like physiological responses that our body has. Like, we evolved emotion before we evolved like conscious thought. So it is like the most primal like state that we have. And even negative emotions like fear or grief or whatever. But the healthiest thing that you can do actually is to process those emotions fully, and like not, kind of like put them in a jar and just like shove them down. So I think, because then they just stay there and fester. And so I think that, to be honest, that is why I have always, and probably will always, love like heavy music, because it is a good vehicle for me to process like negative emotions, like what you're talking about with this band, like this record that allows you to tap into like these negative, like very dark emotions and feelings. That is actually a positive thing to me, because you're allowing yourself to process these physiological things that need to be felt to their fullest extent, and actually not processing those to their fullest extent is leads to a lot of problems down the road. I would actually argue that that's one of the healthiest things that a person can do, and why I think so many people do gravitate towards heavy music, even if it's not like the only thing that you listen to, right? But it does, it's like, it does have a time and a place, and it is a productive thing. Just like playing Nah for us, I think, is a very productive thing for us individually, because you do have to tap into that darkness in order to process it in a healthy and productive manner. And that to me is what is cool, because some people like don't understand, well, not some people, most people I would say don't understand like angry music, because they're like, I just can't get into it. It's just so angry and like mean. Like, why do they have to scream all the time? And And it's like, well, have you ever been pissed off about something? You know, like what is the
They're not in touch with their own anger.
right? So it's like,
Right.
what is the response to that? How do you process anger other than to just like scream? You know,
I mean, I think, I think most people, like, they view that as a bad thing because it comes as an interruption. It builds up. I mean, that's what gnaw is about. It's about the building up of, you know, it says, I am fine. I am indifferent to this. Like, and you know, I'm fine. I'm not going to do anything. And then all of a sudden it spews out of you. Right. And so that's like a negative thing. But what if you can just control that and release the valve a little bit in a healthy way? I mean, that's what, like, you know, martial arts can be good for. That's what, you know, there's a ton of different releases that you can, sports or whatever, but like heavy music or punk music or just aggressive music in general is like such a healthy way to put that out there. I mean, like, especially going to a show, like, and getting in the pit or stage diving or whatever, like that's like a adrenaline thing. Like it's pushing the adrenaline through your body, and also like you can just push somebody and it's okay, you know, like
Right.
It's a healthy release.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Preach.
It's the same with
Well-
it's the same with any kind of music too. Like you can, I'm sure we've all put on like records that make us feel like the saddest that we can possibly feel. And it's like a weird concept to say, because it's like, what, you want to just like feel sad for 40 minutes? Like that doesn't make any sense. But again, it's not about that. It's like about being able to like tap into that emotion and being able to process it like through listening to music or going to a show and seeing a band process that for themselves on stage or whatever it is. Like, to me, that's like one of the healthiest things you can do. And again, why I think music in general is such like a powerful way to do that.
Yeah. I think, I mean, I kind of, I guess to a degree, look at some things as a quote unquote negative, but I feel like it's like, I'll get off on this tangent, and then, like I said, we'll wrap this up because I've kept you guys longer than we were supposed to go. Because Steve's got to have bedtime.
I mean, well, here's the deal: once you get us talking, it's hard to shut us up.
Yeah,
I know. It's same with me. Same with me.
Yeah, fun, yeah. That's a good talk.
But I was going to say, I think for me, like something, you know, I had learned a while ago. I had a friend that was big into like doing different psychedelics and so forth. And I remember whatever he got was from 4chan, and it was an overseas plant additive. But if you just happened to ingest it, it would recreate different types of designer drugs and so forth. And I remember this thing that we took would get you to a peak in a matter of like 2 minutes. You could just stay there. And I remember we did that for a little while. I kind of came to the conclusion, you know, it taught me something that I wasn't happy in the relationship I was in. Decided to pursue my now wife. So obviously I made the right decision in that field. But something I had really learned in doing that was I can't feel great all the time. At some point I have to get off and feel whatever from here. I can feel good, bad, indifferent, but I can't just feel great every minute of every day. And I remember being like, I'm done. He's like, one more. And I go, it's always one more. And it doesn't have to be about this. It could be about anything. If it's eating cheeseburgers, if it's having a beer, if it's whatever, that one thing isn't going to satiate forever. So just enjoy the fun and the positives and the thing in moderation, and then move on from there. But like, you kind of have to experience everything that life gives you. You can't just be happy and at the happiest you've ever been forever. And it was just such a weird thing to kind of see like the joy almost go out of his face where he's like, one more? And I was like,
You mean you can't?
oh man, I'm done. I mean, I could, but I didn't want to anymore. It's like, I was really happy for like 7 hours. I kind of would like to, you know, go to bed and like just experience life.
Yeah. I mean, there's like, reflections of that in philosophy and Stoicism, and there's reflections of that in Christianity, and where it's like you don't understand or appreciate the good until you've gone through the crap, right? Like,
Yeah.
and it's all a part of the same process. Like, and I'm not saying that it's good to just throw yourself into like garbage situations and like, just focus on the crappy part of life, but like to actually appreciate the downtime that leads to like a better, happier time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
tying it all together, it's all about how are you growing, and growing comes through learning. And a lot of learning comes through like having to process different emotional states, because at the end of the day, again, your body is like giving you information about like what's happening, and it's not always good, but that's just part of growth. You can't just grow from feeling good all the time. That just doesn't work.
I wish it did.
Which,
Yeah, we all do.
yeah. Which, by the way, from my perspective, that's what depression is trying not to feel all the bad, quote unquote, bad feelings. You're depressing your anger. You're depressing your sadness. You're depressing whatever the feeling is you don't want to feel, or you're not supposed to feel, or whatever. It's not manly to feel. That's what depression is actually not feeling it. So if you listen to music that makes you feel angry or makes you sad, it's probably because you're already angry and sad, and now it's finally just coming out, which, like you guys are saying, that's a healthy thing. That's a very positive
Right.
thing. So it's like the opposite of depression. So, anyways, you guys are preaching it.
You know what the best song is that speaks all of that you just said, Scotty, is Chandelier by Sia. Like, have you read the lyrics to that song?
That song. Yeah.
Unbelievable. So it's like
Sia's
it's
sick.
about this party girl who does not want to feel, and so like her life must be so bad, and she does not want to come down, because if she comes down, it's like going to be the worst, right? Like, and the story is told so beautifully. And the lyrics to the chorus, I want to swing from the I'm going to swing from the chandelier. I'm going to act like tomorrow doesn't exist. I'm going to fly like a bird in the night, wipe my tears as they fall, or whatever it is. I can't remember the exact lyrics, but it's like, go read those lyrics, because that is the perfect example of someone who wants to avoid their darkest point, which is probably the most healthy for them, to just get down in there and just let it happen and face the darkness. And they just want to stay up. They want to swing from the chandelier. So good.
Man, I am so stoked for your guys' new album, Human Condition, with a chandelier cover as a bonus track. I'm very
Honestly,
excited that is.
I've thought about it.
Maybe we should cover that, Steve. It's not a bad
Maybe we
idea.
should. I don't know.
It's not a bad idea.
I mean, it would be kind of fun. Although that's what I said with Meet Me Halfway. And then I said that if we ever played it live, we'd break up. And then we played it live, and then we broke up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. By the way,
I don't want to play with that fire.
Quick trivia there, Steven, because we were joking about it, that it was Steven's idea to do.
It was me and Scott's idea. It was me and Scott's idea, because we, like, I guess all three of us shared that hotel room in Germany, and they played that movie.
Yeah.
Or that they played that video over and over and over again. It was like every 3 songs, like MTV would play that video, and it just was in our heads all the time. And we're like, well, we could do that song. And then I was like, I hated myself immediately from thinking about it.
How just because we're on it right now, how hard was it to kind of work your way through it, like with live instrumentation? Because like I was just, and as soon as I say this, someone's gonna send me this eventually when this episode posts. I was telling my wife, maybe we finally outgrown the metalcore cover of a big pop song. And I go, because you know what I haven't heard? A metalcore version of Chaperone yet. Thank God so far.
Yeah.
But I assume now that I said that it's going to happen and someone's going to send it to me.
I think Scotty did most of the instrumentation for the cover. And we recorded it. Fun story, kind of. We recorded it at our friend Bone's house in Indy.
Bone had a lot to do with it too. He helped a lot.
Brian Thorne.
Did you say Bone from Philly or okay, never mind, wrong Bone.
But anyway, yeah, and like Mark, and it was basically really what it was an excuse to just like hang out, and Mark really just wanted to like smoke ribs.
Mark was our manager at the time.
Yeah, so he like literally brought like a vertical smoker and just like smoked ribs, and we were like drinking Miller High Life. And it was like during the day, and we were all just like sitting in lawn chairs. Yeah, there was like 30 people that came and hung out, and we were just like sitting in lawn chairs like in the yard while like each of us would go like track the parts or whatever. That's also the day that we found out that Mike is an amazing bass player. Like he is totally underrated. He is special. Like his ability to play bass is totally underrated. He does not get enough love as the bass player because basically he didn't really feel like tracking. And so we all took turns like tracking bass on that song. And it was like sounding okay. And then Mike's like, all right, I'll go down there and just track it one time. And he goes, and it just sounded like 1,000 times better.
Yeah, we were like,
Mike's take.
That's what the bass is supposed to sound like.
Yeah, somehow Mike's take sounded like way better than everyone else's take. And then we realized, like, damn, Mike is an amazing bass player.
Like you don't realize how integral to Haste the Day's sound that Mike Murphy is. Because like most of the time, like you think like bass guitar, whatever. Like you can't really hear it on the records, which is true. On the early records, you can barely hear any of his work, but live and on the newer records, like his bass playing is amazing. Like, and it is so tight. And him and Giuseppe have this thing going on. It's really cool.
Yeah. But it was Meet Me Halfway that opened our eyes to it.
Another this can be the last thing we talk about, but wrapping up Meet Me Halfway, I went in to do my vocal take. I went in to like sing the Fergie part or whatever. And I was so embarrassed that I was like, I told everybody, I was like, all right, we've got to clear out the control room. We've got to clear out the control room. Wow. Like no one can be in here. It's got to be me and Bone, maybe a few guys from the band, but that's it. Because there was like 20 people down there. And there's no like window in the studio. It was in a basement. So like there's no window. And so I go into the tracking room and I record all my parts. It's like very vulnerable for me and awkward and also hilarious. We were having fun, but then I come back out and everyone is still there. Every single person is still in the room. And I was just like, so you guys heard all of that, huh? And they're like, yeah. Awesome.
That's cool. Lastly, where can everyone find you or anything you guys would like to plug online?
So I'd say go to hastetheday.com, sign up for the mailing list. That is the best way to stay updated on things, and follow our Instagram or Facebook, whichever one. I think we have a Twitter and a TikTok too, but
I've literally never seen the TikTok. I have not looked at one.
I haven't looked at it either.
It's just Scotty playing riffs, like you told me earlier about the Instagram.
That's what it should be. If it's not, then we're messing up big time.
Yeah, I'll get on that.
It's coming. I've got some videos from you. I've been running the socials these days.
Yeah,
there are some guitar videos that are.
I've got them queued. They're cute. But yeah, so go to Haste the Day, sign up hastetheday.com, sign up for the email list, follow us on Instagram or Facebook. And also we're playing in Dallas on December 15th with O Sleeper.
Stacked
O Sleeper, He Is Legend, and Living Sacrifice.
And Godfathers.
that is, going to be one of the sickest shows. So if you live in the Dallas area or anywhere within driving distance,
Or not.
come see us there.
You
Or
live
not,
anywhere.
fly
Or
there.
fly.
It's going to be a sick show. So
Yeah.
Use those miles before they roll over the next year. You can't use
Exactly.
them.
Perfect timing.
exactly.
Well, thank you guys once again for taking the time. Sorry, I guys kept you guys longer than we had initially planned, but this was a blast for me. Thank you guys so much for doing it, and looking forward to the new album and hopefully some touring. And like I said before we recorded, you definitely owe the people in Grand Rapids a show.
We do.
Yeah, we do.
definitely
I
do.
think. Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank you,
John.
John.
Great time, man. Appreciate it.
So that was my conversation with Scott, Dave, and Steven. Want to thank them once again for taking the time and even hanging out a little bit longer than they originally had given me. But as they said toward the end, once you get us going, we get going. And I always feel like that's a great sign too of, the guests having a good time being on the show. I can't tell you how rewarding it is from my end when hey, if we can do, you're given X amount of time, famously it happens with Kirk from Crowbar quite a bit, where it's like, yeah, man, you got 25 minutes. You're like, all right, I'm just going to make the best of this time. I'm going to keep track of it, and then I'm going to try to wrap it up. And it's always great when someone's like, man, no, I got time. Let's keep going. This is a lot of fun. So I want to thank those guys for taking the time away from their friends, family, loved ones, and all that kind of stuff on a weekday to chat with me. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you learned some things about the band, about the guys individually. I think the one for me that was I always wondered, but I was a little hesitant to ask because I didn't necessarily want to. I don't know if it's throwing the fans under the bus. In my head, the way I see it, someone's going to hear this question or the question was going to be misinterpreted that I'm trying to attack Christianity or Christians as a whole. But the idea of being in a band, and I remember being on a band on Solid State and, a lot of these Christian labels and so forth are being labeled a Christian metal band or a Christian band at all. I remember it just seemingly from my perspective as someone who didn't grow up in that environment at all, it just felt like such a burden, that you had to be not only a Christian for yourself and whatever that looks like internally, because that's what it really is. It's your internal relationship with your God, with your religion, your faith, and all these kind of things. But then it's once you become, and I'll even extend it beyond just being in a band, but as an entertainer who is known to be this thing, it just becomes so much of your identity that it's you almost have to be an uber faithful person, an uber Christian person, because not only do you have to be so strong in your convictions and know everything, but you have to do it at such a level that it appeases other people, especially a younger demographic, who are trying to figure out their own lives as well, or being judged by the parents who probably think that you're trying to steer their kids down a wrong path or whatever. So just the idea of I'm growing up, I'm trying to figure out who I am, which is hard enough already. Throw in organized religion, different concepts and struggles and all these things. And then now you're also having to be that for somebody else extra. Man, that just, I feel like it would almost drive me nuts. And it's I know the analogy I gave in the chat of I remember playing shows when I was in a band and I was cheap and broke, so I would just drink in the van before we play because I'm not paying venue prices. Even with anybody who's playing a band knows the joke of this, but even the drink tickets, it's this is a joke. So it always just became this thing where it's I remember that experience of playing. We the band I was in, we weren't Christians at all. I don't think any of us had anything to do with faith. But we would play with a lot of bands that did. So I remember we played churches. We played a few different types of of these, I'll call them a fest, even though I know they're not. But, house parties and stuff like that where we're playing with a lot of other Christian bands and getting judged because I'm sitting in my car or our van having a beer by myself or with a friend or whatever. And it's being judged for not being something I never said I was. And it's a really weird thing to put yourself in that situation where you're I'm being judged just for doing something that is just me being me. Like, I didn't ask to be judged. I didn't ask to have this like unfair expectation heaped on me. And to really imagine putting yourself in some of these other guys' situations, it's like, man, that's just got to be such a hard life to live. Where it's like I forget who it was. I think it might have been Dave or someone talking about like, yeah, I used to smoke, or maybe it wasn't smoking, maybe it was drinking. But it's like I'd have to go like 4 blocks away from where we were playing to go have a beer, and it's like just so someone didn't see me. And it's like, man, I couldn't imagine that being my life, of just like having to hide, or I guess you could say repress who you are just to satiate and appease somebody else. Just so this idea and this perception of who you're supposed to be to them is satiated, for lack of a better term. I don't know. It's just a very interesting time and way to think about how you traverse your life, especially, like I said, at a young age where you're already insecure and don't know much about anything. I'd be interested to see, like, I've talked to Dan, former co-host of the show, that was a lot of his experience. And if you listen to Discography Discussion, if you go back and even listen to some of the earlier episodes of DFT's Dungeon, that's sort of a lot of what he kind of was wrestling with a lot of times, is like, man, it's so wild to think about it. Like, the only frame of reference really with any of that kind of stuff I had was, being told I couldn't listen to Marilyn Manson or Green Day when they first came out because of the lyrics. And then, having friends burn me these albums and listening to them on my own in the dark and the secrecy, which kind of made it feel cooler, but also was just like, man, this is kind of lame that I can't listen. You're telling me I can't listen to something that I find enjoyment in. I don't know. It's just, you never know the life that you don't lead. So that's why I'm very inquisitive. That's why I like asking questions. So again, hopefully you found something new in this. It's always kind of the joy too of doing these with people who have been doing press for many, 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 many years, is being able to hopefully find something new about your peers, about people that you really admire and want to know more about. But definitely want to thank all the guys for the honesty about things that we discussed in this. And at the end of the day, man, that's all I want to do. I just want to bring real, great, honest conversations with the artists and myself. Going to start wrapping this up, though. I'm starting to feel like I'm starting to lose my voice a little bit. And I got a couple of bar shifts to also work over the next couple of days. So that is not going to bode well for me. Anyway, if you would like to keep up with Haste the Day, you just go to hastetheday.com. I believe you can pick up some of the pre-orders for the Coward 10th Anniversary Edition Remix Remastered. Go pick that up if you haven't already. Listen to it on all the DSPs. The latest single, Burn, is out now. Obviously, as I said in the intro, they re-signed with Solid State, so there should be new music coming probably sometime this year, I would hope. Don't know about touring or anything like that, but just hastetheday.com is kind of the landing page for everything. Otherwise, Facebook, Haste the Day, Instagram, Haste the Day Official, and Twitter at Haste the Day. If you would like to keep up with Dave, you can find him on Instagram and Twitter under his name, DAVEKRYSL. If you would like to keep up with Scott, you can find him on Instagram at WScottWhalen and Twitter at Scotty Whalen. And Steven, you can find on Instagram and Twitter under Stephen Keach. And if you would like to keep up with the podcast, you can find us simple enough, Brew Speak Pod, on all your major social media platforms. Rate, review, subscribe. You know why that is important. Everyone talks about it on all the other podcasts. Do such if you are able to. Email me at brutallyspeaking@gmail.com with guest suggestions or keep the conversation going from a past episode. A lot of people have been doing that lately in DMs and so forth. It's been great. I always appreciate it. Keep it going. And speaking of keeping it going, keep the support of Rockabilia going. They have been doing and crushing lately. Holiday seasons are done. We're about ready to enter Valentine's Day. They always do something cool around Valentine's Day. I'm hoping, I really should give Frankie a call here in a second when I'm done with this, but I should see if they're going to finally get the idea they've had for the last, I think, 3 years for a Valentine's Day idea out of just an idea phase and actually put it into execution. But they do a lot of great things, work with a lot of great bands, new bands, established bands, all kinds of crazy merch. The Milo Descendants figure, that is the launch of basically them starting to make toys. I know there's at least 2 other ones that are probably coming down the pipeline here pretty quickly. But go over to rockabilia.com, check out their hundreds of thousands of items in their online store. I know that they bought out another company early last year, I should say. A lot of those items that are going up on the store, constantly being updated. Use our code BREWtally at checkout. Take 10% off your total purchase order. Want to thank them for continuing to support this show as we get ready to hit a huge milestone of episode 500. I have a project I've been doing for that. I'm probably about halfway done with it currently. Probably reveal more of that soon. Anyway, this has been another episode of the BREWtally Speaking podcast. I am John. I'll see you all next week where I have Joey and Blake of Pop Evil joining me. That was a good time. I will see you all next week.